Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A53 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2025. Now, in a lot of ways, this type of phone probably is not worth buying in some ways. In other ways, maybe it still is worth buying. We'll talk about it throughout this whole entire video. But if you want to go ahead and pick up this phone or maybe some other phones that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy A53. This phone originally came out in 2022, so it's already been a little bit of time. So that is kind of one of those things to keep in mind here. And with something like the, Samsung Galaxy A53, this is one of those types of devices where I can kind of look at, and I feel like within these particular types of devices, they're not terrible, they're not, super bad. With the Samsung Galaxy A53, this phone is giving you a 6.5-inch Super AMOLED display on the front. And the display itself actually isn't really in that bad of condition. I think it actually looks pretty decent. It gets you 800 nits of brightness, which really isn't that great, but it does give you like a pretty good type of display for how cheap this phone was. You have to remember, with the Galaxy A series of phones, these are basically cheap types of devices that you can basically buy. So these aren't really like the most expensive phones in the market or anything like that. These are relatively more affordable types of devices that you can go ahead and get. And I do think that is in and of itself a really good thing to kind of keep in mind there. So although it isn't the biggest deal in the world or biggest thing in the world, it still is kind of a nice thing to have a phone like this that is giving you at least like a budget phone, but with a 120 hertz display. And I think that is in and of itself a really cool thing here. Now, you are getting a USB Type-C port on the bottom of this phone, and you're also getting a microSD card slot as well. So having those types of things inside of this phone is something that is nice to have. And I do feel like that in and of itself, it is a cool thing at the end of the day. Again, is it perfect? Probably not, but it still is giving you like a decent type of layout. And getting a phone like this in pretty much any capacity, I think is still something that's super nice to have. So again, it isn't necessarily the best type of thing in the world. I still think it is like a good looking phone, and I still think it is giving you a lot of cool stuff. It isn't necessarily perfect, but I do feel like this is still a phone that you can go ahead and get. And it still is giving you like a decent type of layout, although it's not perfect. Now, on top of that, on the backside, this phone is basically giving you like a frosted plastic back. So that right there is another one of those big things to keep in mind here too. Because within this particular type of device, I will tell you in my personal opinion, this type of device with its plastic back, it's not terrible, but it isn't going to be like the nicest type of back of all time either. So that right there is going to be another one of those big things to keep in mind here as well. Because if you are wanting the phone that is going to be giving you like a better type of layout, this is basically what we're expecting, right? That's kind of what we're going to expect to get. And I do feel like this is in and of itself, kind of one of those big things to keep in mind there as well. So albeit it's not the biggest, deal in the world, I do feel like that is kind of one of those things to keep in mind there as well. Now, on top of that, if you are going to go through and pick up one of these types of phones, you are also pretty much going to get another kind of big issue here too, where you're missing out on a couple of things. One, you're missing out on wireless charging and reverse wireless charging. So there isn't really any of that inside of this phone, and that might age this phone a little bit more because you're not really going to be getting that type of capability here, which is kind of somewhat of a disadvantage, I would say, if you're going to go through and buy this type of device. Now, on top of that, you're also going to go through and kind of miss out on some other things inside of this type of device too. Things like, reverse wireless charging, like I mentioned. It's not the most powerful phone in the world and the camera system isn't that great, but it is a substantially cheaper type of device. So that might be one thing to kind of keep in mind there as well. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there too. When it comes down to the camera layout, this phone is basically going to be giving you that triple camera setup on the backside. So this camera isn't necessarily terrible. It still is like a good camera for the most part as well. And I do think that is in and of itself a nice thing to kind of keep in mind here too. The camera itself, if you're going to go through and pick it up, it still is giving you like a good type of layout. It still looks good, it still feels good, and I do think, like I said, if you are about to go through and pick up a phone, this thing still gives you a good type of layout for the most part. Is it perfect? Probably not, but it still is like it's an okay type of camera. You're basically getting 4K at 30 on the backside and 4K at 30 on the front side. So going through and getting a phone like this, it isn't necessarily like the worst, experience of all time. It still is giving you like a good, decent type of experience, which is something that I really do like. But if you are about to go through and pick up a phone, you have to remember that this type of device is just giving you a little bit of a weirder type of experience because you're not able to do things like 4K at 60 frames per second, no 8K capability. It is a little bit of a outdated type of camera when it comes down to it from that perspective. So there isn't really that big of a reason to look at this type of phone and consider buying it because the camera layout is just already so outdated. So I feel like there are so many better types of cameras to go ahead and buy rather than these ones. And that's kind of the situation that we'll kind of run into over and over again. So from that side too, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now, on top of that, when it comes down to its software longevity, this phone is kind of interesting because it looks like it's still kind of supported with software. It started off with Android 12. Right now, it did get One UI 7, so it started off at an earlier version of One UI. It's on One UI 7 right now. It looks like it's still going to be on One UI 7 for a little bit of time. It might get One UI 8, who knows? But as of this point, that's kind of where we're at with that particular version of software. I think from what I'm seeing, this phone is still doing like a good job from a performance, like from a software perspective. And I do feel like this is in and of itself another one of those big things to keep in mind there as well. Because if you're able to go through and pick up a phone, this is one of those cool things to keep in mind here. So being able to go through and pick up these types of devices, I think it is something that's really nice. Again, maybe it's not perfect, but that is kind of an idea of what we're kind of expecting, right? So in my personal opinion, if you are going to go through and pick up this phone, at least it's still kind of supported with software. It's also giving you a 5,000 mAh battery, which is also another really cool thing here. Like this type of device is still giving you like a good type of experience when it does kind of come down to it. So I feel like from that perspective too, that is another one of those cool things to keep in mind here as well. And finally, when it comes down to the performance side, this phone is basically going to be giving you that Exynos 1280 chipset with 4, 6, or 8 gigabytes of RAM. So that right there is another really big thing to kind of keep in mind here as well. Because if you're going to go through and pick up this type of phone, well, you're going to have to remember that this type of device and this type of, performance, it's not really going to be that great of a performing phone, anymore. Especially if you get that cheap model. If you get the base model, that's going to be kind of a problem. But if you go and get that like top tier model, well, I guess that might be a little better because you will have 8 gigs of RAM. But even then, the chipset itself just isn't really that great. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense to go and buy a phone like this of this caliber if you're already going to be running into these types of problems. So I personally do feel like from that perspective, this type of device from a performance side just really isn't that great either. So where does that leave us now? Well, in my personal opinion, I probably will tell you it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go and buy a phone like a Samsung Galaxy A53 anymore. I think there are probably better types of devices to go and spend your money on rather than these ones. I think buying a phone like a Samsung Galaxy S23 would be substantially better times a million than this phone. A Samsung Galaxy S23 would be a really good type of device to go ahead and buy. I think a Samsung Galaxy, maybe a Google Pixel 8 would also be a really good phone. An iPhone 14 Pro would be a really good phone too. There are still some really good phones I would recommend buying more so rather than this one. So from that side in and of itself, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.